Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon, and I've been investing in property for over 20 years. And if you're an active landlord or planning your next property investment, this podcast is for you. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, I would really appreciate it if you could tell one or two other property people about the Business of Property podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Simmons. He started his property journey around 2009, and his sort of main approach to property is to try and add value to individual properties that he works on. And particularly then, having done that, to bring that property back to market and for onward sale rather than the renting. However, the main thing that we're actually going to talk to Richard about today is that he set up his own property event, his own networking event for property people. And he started that in 2011. So it has been running for quite a while now. So Richard, welcome very much to the podcast. And perhaps first off, you could tell us a little bit about what your property event is and why you started it in the first place.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for the opportunity of being involved in your podcast. Well, yes, it began in 2011 on the basis really that I knew that I needed to learn a lot more than I did at that point. And if that was the case for me, then I thought it was bound to be the case for quite a lot of other people, really. It's property I was finding at that point, and it's certainly been reinforced since. It's quite a lonely business. It tends to be people working by themselves in their own silos. And I felt if nothing else, then at least having a monthly event gave me and gave other people the opportunity of getting together with like-minded people and the chance to share, to gain knowledge, to broaden network contacts and so on, really. So that's how it's begun, and that's how it's run ever since.
So once you decided that you thought a property event would be a good idea, how did you go about creating that thing?
Yes. Well, my previous career background in high-level sport had a key element within it of organisation and putting events together. So I didn't find it that difficult. It was just the medium itself that I had to think about, obviously, in terms of what the main constituents would be of the event month by month, and so on. So and the feature that I began with and has run with ever since is always to try and focus on a particular subject each month and a particular presenter as part of that as well. Someone who's really good at doing what it is that the subject might be that particular month, and asking them to come in and give us an insight into what it is, how to best do it, and advice for other people, really.
So I'm going to ask this question, even though I know the answer because I have been to your excellent event. But it's structured around a person, a speaker, but that's not the only element to your event. So what else is sort of involved in the events that you run then? How do they look?
Yes, okay, yeah. I mean, there's quite a variety each month, and that's deliberate because it may be that the key subject, if you like, the main speaker and then the main presentation might not be central to that person coming. And if that's the only thing on offer, then the likelihood is that they won't come. So we try and ensure that there's enough variety and enough reasons by themselves for the person to say, regardless of the subject that might be the main feature, that they A, want to come, and B, they need to come for a variety of reasons.
Were you able to have that sort of varied structure and content right from the beginning, or is this something that's evolved over the years you've been running the event?
It's pretty much been stable all the way through, Simon. Really, we'll have tweaked things here and there as you do. But pretty much, no, it has been there. I mean, even try physical things like we actually have a printed program. I don't know of another event that does that. And so that was if you like, a USP in a sense straight away. But it also meant, and a central part of that, I have a team of sponsors. They're all service providers in key respects with regard to property. So that might, for one person in 1 month, might mean that's the particular reason for them to come. They need to resolve an insurance aspect, or it could be a number of different things. Really, it could be damp or whatever, because the providers we've got are all centrally involved in property.
I wonder if perhaps we could dig a little more into how you you sort of got it off the ground. So you had the need for, or you wanted to be able to go to a property event yourself, and you couldn't find one, so you decided to create one. But once you've made that decision and you've put together a plan for what it's going to look like, how do you sort of, or how did you bootstrap that process and find people to speak and find people to come along and attend?
Yes, you're right. Getting it launched wasn't entirely straightforward and simple, because around that time, sort of 2009, 10, then people tended to gravitate to what we called the Berkshire Property Meet, and that was drawing people in from certainly all over the south and beyond, because the turnout was 250, 300 people each month, and that was the only event, and I felt that number was way too many. I didn't want as many as that, because you might think with that number of people, it's actually very easy to make contact. In fact, I found the opposite was the case, and you were in rows of seats, and it was very difficult to get out of where you were, and not easy to make meaningful contact with people beyond the hello, who are you kind of level of conversation. So I knew I needed to learn a lot, and education has been a key part of my background in professional life in any case. So I wasn't daunted by the event. It was really a case of leaning on relationships that I was developing for the first time at that stage, in terms of what were the key subjects that we ought to try and address, who would be really good as presenters to actually deliver those messages, really, and take it from there. So I did lean on a small number of people in the early stages, but after that, it begins to get a momentum of its own, and hopefully word gets out as well. So from there on, it's actually, it has worked very well. We don't have people selling from the front of the room. I'm not part of a franchise where I need to be doing certain things and having certain things said from the front of the room and rushing people back to the rear of the room to buy a ticket for this, that, and the other. I decided at the very outset I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want people having to tell me what to do and what I couldn't do. Hence why we set out being independent from day one, and that's continued right through to now.
So did you need to advertise it anywhere to help landlords and property people to find it initially?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was very difficult to know where to advertise, because there was no obvious medium in a sense, really. It's about people. For me, property is a people business. It's not about bricks and mortar. That's, if you like, is the commonality. But it's really about people, isn't it? It's finding solutions for people. And so it was just really about trying to get word out there. So I did try to go to other events, and where I had the opportunity, say something about the Surrey Property Exchange. I'm not sure that was very particularly effective, because at the end of the day, there's a finite number of events you can go to say things like that, and obviously geography is a factor. How far are people prepared to travel? If it's central London, then that's relatively easy, and people are well used to getting on the tube and going places. If you're outside London, then clearly you're going to be driving or getting on a train. So basically, you're driving, really. So it hinges around that. So a key part to start with was making sure I picked a very good venue. And as it happens, we've had that venue since day one. It's the Guildford Holiday Inn, where we've, on a couple of occasions through the last 13 years, thought about going somewhere else, but actually came back to the view that was the best place. So we've stayed there.
Fantastic. And having, as I said, been to a couple of your events recently, I agree. It works really well. It's a good venue, barring one or two technical issues at one of the recent ones. But anyway, we'll gloss over that. Yes. So I'm very keen on being sort of realistic on this podcast, and that very much applies to sort of disputing a lot of the sort of get rich quick and make your fortune overnight sort of things.
Yeah.
But along with that is the fact that everything does take time to build. And I spoke to Julia a while ago about the start of Crawley Property Meet, and how initially that was 4 people meeting up. So could you give us an idea of sort of the numbers when you first started Surrey Property Exchange, and then how long that took to sort of build up?
Yeah, I think the very first, I've got all the programs going back to the very first event. And I think that was a case of twisting arms of friends and so on, really. I think we had 10 or 11 in the room for the very first time. And I had a presenter come up from Brighton who I knew well, who was very, very experienced in the business. Yeah, how long did it take? Well, I guess just a few months, and then people speak to other people, and you hope that does the trick for you, and it has pretty much. We've got a small number, but we have got some key personnel within the network event who've fundamentally been there since day one, all that time ago. But equally, there've been people that have come in and have also, moved on to other things for themselves, whether that's outside property or within, and that's fine too. If we've helped people at some point, all well and good.
Yeah, I mean, having been running for so long, that's there's clearly going to be a lot of sort of life happening in that time. So,
Yes.
so people are going to come and go, as you say.
Absolutely.
Speaking of sort of life happening and unexpected things happening, you have been running this event for long enough that you were running it before COVID, and you have been running it after COVID.
Yeah.
And COVID obviously created quite a lot of challenges for in-person events.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you adapted and kept the event running during that difficult period.
Which we did. We've never missed an event in 13 years, So and we run 12 months of the year. I should stress as well. We do run an event in August, and we run an event in December too. And we always have done, because I think the continuity factor is a very important one for people, really. And as soon as you break that, and COVID gave us that massive challenge, because it wasn't a 1 month situation. It went on for a long time, and then we had it again a second time where we had lockdown. So we actually did go online. It wasn't fantastic, but we survived it, and we had sufficient impetus there with support from good numbers of people, thankfully, that we were able to continue and maintain what we had as a key atmosphere and key feel for the event. So when we went back live, it wasn't a start all over again from scratch situation, which it was for some people, and a good number of events sadly died because they, once that link was broken, they couldn't get it back, and I could see that being a possible threat, and that's why I was adamant that we did keep going and we worked online.
Yeah. Did you manage to keep sort of the networking side of it running online? Because I know that was always a real challenge for events that I attended during that period.
It was, and not easy. I'm not saying we did it very well. We didn't. That was one of the key sacrifices in a sense, because it was about having some contact. Was it great contact? No. And could you be one-to-one about it? Well, obviously you couldn't. You were online, so we just had to accept the compromises on the basis that something was a whole lot better than nothing.
Yeah, indeed. And obviously it did work ultimately. You did keep things going, and you did move back into the real world afterwards, and your events are carrying on and generally flourishing from what I can tell. So you also, between us, we mentioned networking and that being an important value of the events, but obviously being a challenge during the pandemic. So when it's in person and you don't have those extra challenges, what do you think people sort of get or gain from attending in-person events?
Mm-hmm. I think, and some could be quite obvious and measurable, I guess, but some it's not, is it? You can't put a figure on it or a value on it. In terms of coming to listen to a main presenter on a key subject, clearly you can take measurable information away from that. But other information is quite ad hoc, because you don't know what you're going to find out until you're there, and conversations happen, or you hear what you hear from the front of the room and think, oh yes, I'll take action on that. And some of it is impossible to quantify. On the basis of a particular conversation, you strike up with somebody on the same table, because I've never had rows of seats. We always have had tables, because I'm very bothered about it being interactive. That's really important, because I've had the experience of going to events and thinking, well, I don't know anybody here. How am I going to make contact? And it's not easy if you're sat in a fixed row and you've got one person to your left, one person to your right. If you've got that many people that you are sat beside people, and often that's not the case. You've got perhaps several seats spare, so it's not easy. So that level of contact is important. That's not contact from me with the people. I want that contact to be the people with the people. And if you like, and I'm the facilitator or the enabler, really, along with hopefully a few other people doing the same thing as me within my team. But I kind of try to lead it from the front of the room without being, too dictatorial about it. Just the opposite if I can.
Yes. Having a moment where you declare everyone must turn to their left and speak to the next person.
Yeah, and just in the last few months, we have had this network phase now at the start of the event. People are networking anyway informally beforehand, because I have another reason we do what we do is to actually we offer tea and coffee on a free basis, because having that tea and coffee is a clutch for some of us. In then being able to talk, because you've got something to do as well, haven't you? You've got a drink, and that helps break the ice, literally. So we have that at the very beginning, and that's available for half an hour before we start. And then, having got over 5 minutes of admin and intros, we then have a breakout where it's table networking. So there's a real chance for people to get into some depth of conversation for that amount of time within whoever's on the table, 4 or 5 people. Perhaps it's only you and one person. That's for the people on the table to decide for themselves, really. And that's we found that works really very well. And I find it's quite a challenge for me to then draw it back to being a sort of semi-formal event with things being led from the front of the room. But that's fine. That's not a complaint at all. It's important that people feel they can gain from that. And judging by the number of conversations going around the room, you can see that clearly it does work. It's important.
Yeah, I agree. It does work quite well. And as you say, it can be actually a bit difficult to convince people to stop talking and return to focusing.
Well, that's great, because the opposite is so much worse. The fact that no one's communicating at all.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about the focusing at the front and the speakers that you have, can you share a few examples and give us an idea of sort of the kind of people, or maybe just the kind of topics that people have presented recently, and or maybe some of your favourites over the last 15 years or so?
Difficult to. I wouldn't want to try and pick out a favourite, really. I mean, what we've tried to do, I have a team with me, and we sit down separately every month for about 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes face to face. We actually meet in a hotel and have a drink between us. Sometimes it's on Zoom. But the important thing is to talk through what was really good about the last event, what are we aiming to try and do in the next event, and looking ahead 4 or 5 months, what are the subjects that we feel we want to try and cover, and who do we want to try and deliver them, and as part of that, certainly once a year, usually twice a year, we actually put that out to the whole group, everyone in the room, and say, what is it that you feel you'd like to have covered, and the who to be delivering it, really, to try and ensure that we are giving what people want to hear, really, and who from, So to come back to your question about subjects, it could be anything that's property related, and sometimes it's quite distant property related. But for our most recent event a few days ago, the main feature was somebody who's done a really good job in converting what was a commercial building into a mix of commercial and residential, and mini HMOs as part of that. So it was her warts and all story from day one to day end, not the sugar-coated version that you might get from somebody selling a course somewhere or other, or offering it online to you. It was literally warts and all. And the other presentation was from somebody who's absolutely sold on systems-built housing and wanting that to become much more of a feature in Britain than it is at the minute, because it's tiny at the moment, hardly exists. And yet, if you go into Europe, it's really widespread. So there was an insight from Philip Russell, as it happened, on a project he did in Oxted, which was pretty much the first one, which was someone's residential home being created, a detached 4 or 5 bed house, and he's now involved pretty extensively in creating the first Buddhist temple outside Thailand, which is being created in East Grinstead, so on a systems built basis, so very different, So and that was good for him to put across, because it making the point that it's not very fixed. It's got to be this or it's got to be that. It can be anything. And the point is, it can be systems built to be anything. It can be built in a factory to whatever design you want to have, and it comes on the back of a lorry, and it's put up in 2 or 3 days, and it's watertight, and you can have all the services working within 4 weeks, not 9 months, on an all-weather basis being built outside, by tradesmen coming in every single day. Very different. So it could be things like that. It could be, yes, all kinds of strategies that people are involved in property, but it could be to do with personal development. We've done that as well. We've looked at IT and how IT can benefit people in property. There's lots of very clear ways, and you're offering a terrific way yourself. Hence why we're very keen to try and strengthen that link with you. All manner of things. And we've come back to some subjects 2 or 3 times over 13 years, because they're important. And therefore, there was almost nobody in the room the last time you delivered it. So therefore, we need to have that presented again. So we're always on the lookout for, key things that we feel would make a difference and be something to be of value for people in the room. That's it. And it's not about selling anything at all. No courses to sell. On very rare occasions, they might be doing something commercially, and that's fine for them to be mentioning it, because it gives people the opportunity to get more involved in that if they want to with that person. But it's not the reason for them to be there at all, and that's quite important for me, and that's why I've continued on in the way that we have over those 13 years.
Yeah, I do like it when the speaker and the sort of main information being shared is really about sharing knowledge rather than about trying to sell you something for 45 minutes or whatever it is. And certainly, I mean, I've been at the last couple of your events, and just picking up on what you mentioned about the speakers from the most recent one, it really was very interesting. And the systems built housing, I mean, there were some incredibly short timescales being mentioned on that process. And I know Philip, the presenter, mentioned that the sort of cost is probably kind of similar to traditional build, but you just compact the timeline and get some great results, which is very fascinating stuff, and really fascinating to hear him talk about that, and to see the photos and the projects of what he's doing, and then similarly the other speaker about their conversion as well. I mean, fantastic, as you say, the real true details of what went through the project and how it went wrong and how they adapted and rescued the project effectively. And it's a fantastic learning. And
that's the reality of development, because things don't go swimmingly all the time, and they go swimmingly almost not at all, ever. And it's all about adapting, isn't it? And working out a new way all the time, being positive about it and not getting drawn down into negativity, but saying, well, okay, we've got to think of it afresh. How do we do that? That's it.
Yep, indeed, yeah. So I think I've got a couple more things I'll just ask you in a moment, but just to sort of round up the sort of mentioning of your event, it is Surrey Property Exchange, and it is hosted in Guildford. And anyone who's interested should have a look at the show notes. There will be a link there to your website where people can find out more details, find out about what's coming up and past events as well, and also to purchase tickets. It is obviously a paid event, so that's worth mentioning as well. And I really do recommend anyone that is in that area to check it out and go along and have a look. Having said that, I think sort of the last little bit I'd like to talk to you about is perhaps a little bit about your own property business. And before we started recording, we thought perhaps an interesting way into that would be to ask how you've seen things change in property over the last 14, 15, 16 years you've been working in property.
Yes, I guess there has been some change with not in simple practical things like cost of materials, for example. That's changed radically, and not for the better, obviously. But you just got if you're in it and you're wanting to do it, then you just got to adapt and rephrase things for yourselves, really. So some things have changed, but equally you change yourself, don't you? In terms of how you view things. I initially began because I was a novice, thinking that I should target areas that were not very expensive and tackle things that were not too big. So it was fairly simple projects, adding value, bringing them back to the marketplace, always dressing and staging them, because that's an important factor for me. I want to make a statement about lifestyle and quality, and dressing and staging enables you to do that, rather than just being bare rooms in an empty building, which doesn't get, because I'm wanting to create homes at the end of the day, and a home is not for four bare walls with nothing in it at all. So yes, so I've moved from relatively inexpensive areas to areas closer to where I live in Surrey. I live in Esher in Surrey, and that's challenging as an area, clearly, because the entry cost is so high, and there aren't so obvious, below market value opportunities. They don't exist in that sense at all. Whereas you perhaps might find them in places further north or places further west. But does that mean there's no opportunity? No, it just means you've got to think a little differently about what the opportunity could be, really, and what difference you can make in it, and does it will it stack up? Will it draw investment funds? Because I do things on the basis of it being bridging and private funding. Yeah, and it's not your own funds because they rapidly run out. So it's not just enthusing yourself. You've got to enthuse other people that it's worth doing, and that it would definitely work, and so on. So yeah, that's really it. So I look at places and work out how can I add value. The most important information you ever need is a floor plan. That's vital for me. Well,
I do love a good floor plan.
Yeah, floor plans are crucial because you can then begin to see what difference you could make to something. How can you add value, and in what respect can you do that? So that's how I begin. I sketch things out, work out what I can do, and when I'm ready and we feel we can move things on, I then draw my architect team member in, and he then formalizes it from what I've already sketched, and we take it on from there. Really, that's really it. So yeah, it's I now would take on things which are a bit more ambitious than I would have done at the start, and that's sensible for me. You shouldn't be taking things on at the start just because it's big and a super opportunity on paper. It's a matter of whether you can manage it, and have you got the right people around to ensure that you can deliver it. Because I've made a number of mistakes. And and then you've got to make one mistake in property, and it can be fatal. It really can. And I can speak for that. It's very easy to make an error in numerous different respects in terms of what you're going to try to do, or how much you're going to spend, or what you spent to buy it, or all sorts of things. Really, how long it takes to do it. That can be the death knell for a project. It can work in 12 months, but if it takes you 2.5 years to do it, then it doesn't work, and it's the same project, and you're going to deliver the same thing, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Just because,
not least because you're probably paying for finance for that extra
exactly,
time, and it
exactly
just changes the numbers radically.
Absolutely, yeah. Materials go up in the meantime, all sorts of things, and what started off being a definitely viable project ends up being a disaster for you, without being too dramatic about it. It can be a disaster.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I have heard numerous horror and near horror stories from people in the property world.
No, I've done it. I've committed it. Hands up. It's I can speak from personal experience.
Well, we're unfortunately we've run out of time for today, but perhaps you'll have to come back and share some of your horror stories.
Right.
They always make for good listening, I think. So I think with that, it just remains for me to say thank you very much, Richard, for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me. I hope it's been of some value for yourself, but more importantly for the people that are listening as well, really.
Yep, I think it certainly has been. I think it's a fascinating conversation, and I really hope that it helps to share the value of property events and property networking with more people, especially people in and around Guildford.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and don't forget, it's not Guildford centric. We just happen to meet in Guildford. People come from considerable distances, and anyone who'd like to be involved would be very, very welcome. It's always the second Monday of the month, every month.
Fantastic. And links and things will be in the show notes, but perhaps you could also just say where people can go online to find more details.
Yes, our event is the Surrey Property Exchange, so it's the obvious www.surreypropertyexchange.co.uk. And there's quite a lot of information on the website, and we have a membership program as well, and our own closed WhatsApp group. So there's a number of different aspects where we can hopefully offer considerable amount of help and support for people who might like that, to break up their solitary work every single month in property.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I do recommend people go and have a look at that. As I said, links will be in the show notes, and I will speak to you all again next week.